the drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston. It's been a while since I've been able to go live, honestly, because the Celtics schedule has been so busy, and I'm pretty much only doing this on off days. But I figured I'd jump on here today and just go over the last week or so. I think I did one of these after the DC trip, and obviously the Celtics have had a lot going on in these last few days, from Kristaps Porzingis' return to winning several games. A 7-game win streak was snapped on Sunday, but they bounced back with another win last night. So everything from the 17-4 start to the stay ready guys. I think, as some of you know, I spent a lot of time going up to Maine and talking to those guys. I actually just went to an event with Drew Peterson, Jordan Walsh, Neemias Queta, and Baylor Shireman. So happy to talk about all those guys and kind of my takeaways on the stay ready culture that I think honestly is so unique about this organization, as well as another culture that I think is really unique, and that's kind of the family oriented style. So as always, you can put any questions you have in the chat box and I will get through all of them. And if I miss your question, feel free to put it in there again and I will be sure to answer it. So feel free to bug me. I don't intend to miss it, but sometimes I just, miss it through other messages. And I'll acknowledge off the bat because I saw a bunch of commenters. My eye is fine. It's just like a blood vessel, I think. So from what I read online. So if you're an eye doctor and you think otherwise, don't let me know because I don't even want to know. But it is fine. So everybody, I got a lot of messages after the Garden report yesterday expressing concern. It's like a harmless thing, I think. But in any case, I can start at the top, which is the stay ready stuff, because I think that's honestly the most interesting piece of what we've seen as of late with this team. And in particular last night, which was a game against Miami that Joe Mazzulla insisted was not a rival. But, Eric Spoelstra, or not a rival, but he said that all of the teams are rivals. So nothing unique about Miami. Eric Spoelstra has maintained otherwise, and it's been kind of fun to cover Joe Mazzulla and then cover whichever coach is also coming to Boston, because they always have a very different mindset and they answer questions very differently. So it's always funny to just see the disparity in how they talk about things. But yeah, Miami's always fun from my standpoint as a reporter. I think there's always a little bit of extra juice in the building, even if they're not quite as good as they used to be. And it's definitely one of those rivalries that has a very clear slant that the Celtics are kind of on the winning side right now. But Joe Mazzulla went with a bunch of bench players. Jordan Walsh in the starting lineup. Jordan Walsh played a significant amount. We talked to him about that today. And just to start the season, I honestly didn't expect him to play as much as he has this year. And it's been in and out, but he's stayed ready. I think the big story for a lot of maybe more casual fans is Drew Peterson, who I saw people were asking on Twitter, like, who is this guy? Literally didn't recognize his face, didn't recognize his name. I think a lot of people that are on here probably know a little bit about him at least, but he's a guy that signed with the Celtics on a 2-way deal last year. Actually in December, so it's been about a year. And he came from Miami, so that was a little funny wrinkle that he spent summer league and training camp with the Miami organization, formed a lot of relationships over there, but they didn't offer him a 2-way, so he was just on their G League team in Sioux Falls. And then the Celtics swept up and poached him, and he signed a 2-year deal, a 2-way deal with them last year, and then re-signed this offseason. And I've watched Drew Peterson a bunch of times. I've probably interviewed Drew Peterson more than any player in Maine or Boston, because he's like usually the leading scorer in Maine. So anytime I went up to Maine, I usually would speak with him afterwards. Super nice guy, super friendly, very hard. Was undrafted, had a really great college career, and is just an interesting character because he's not. It's nothing that he does jumps out at you as like he's a phenomenal shooter or he's a phenomenal ball handler or he's like known for his defense. But he kind of does everything well. And I asked Joe Mazzulla yesterday after the game, I said to him, Drew Peterson played a total of 30 NBA minutes entering this week. So that's pretty much nothing. And then in 2 games in a back-to-back, he played 51 NBA minutes. So it's pretty remarkable to go from literally you've never played in the NBA to now you're 2 nights in a row playing heavy minutes. And basically I was like, what about Drew Peterson stands out to you that he's kind of separated himself, at least for right now? These things can change pretty quickly, but at least for right now, what separated him from the rest of the pack and what stands out about him. And he said the main thing that really stands out to him about Drew is that he's a really good defender and that people don't expect him to be a good defender. He actually mentioned Sam Hauser as maybe a similar example of somebody that opposing teams try to pick on. They try to get him, in bad position and try to hunt him on offense. And he actually holds his own. And I think if you tuned into the Cleveland game, he actually did a pretty good job against guys like Darius Garland, who are really hard to guard for even really good defenders. And so it's not that he's going to get every stop, but it's also nobody does. But certainly I think a guy like Drew Peterson can hold his own defensively, can hit the open shot. He's hit several three-pointers here in the early days of his career. So I think when you see some of the guys that are falling out of the rotation, they are not necessarily known for their shot, and he's not a lockdown shooter. He's not a Sam Hauser type shooter, but he's a solid shooter, and I think he's around league average right now, and that's what I expect him to be, at least in the beginning. And obviously, I think he has room for improvement. He's still just 24 years old. He's the same age as the Celtics rookies, so Baylor Scheierman, Anton Watson. He's similar age to them, but he has a little bit more experience with the Celtics system. So I think Drew's a fun one to follow just because he wasn't on people's radars. This is not a guy that's going to make or break our championship chances. But as we look into the future and just recognizing that, this team's going to be really expensive. There's going to be guys getting older. Like they're not going to be drafting for, early lottery picks anytime soon, hopefully. So guys like Drew Peterson and guys like Jordan Walsh, who maybe, people don't think are necessarily like really high impact, high ceiling players, I think are going to end up playing a pretty big role with this team. And the Celtics have a really unique culture. The Maine is really a segue to Boston in a very proven way. It's not just the thing you say. It's not just something that they tell the guys in Maine so that they try hard and they work hard. The reality is that most of these players actually have seen that there's a proven track record of if you work hard in Maine and you do your job, there's a real window of opportunity there. And so Sam Hauser was in Maine, now is a key rotation player in Boston. Luke Cornett, same deal. From last year's group, Neemias Queta, Jordan Walsh, both were in Maine. I mean, Jordan was in Maine the entire year. Both rotation players now. And now we're seeing maybe the new guy getting in the mix, and that's Drew Peterson. And I still think he's going to be in Maine quite a bit. I don't think it's going to be consistent minutes for him when everybody's healthy, but I think it shows you that Joe Mazzulla and his staff trust him. And I've asked Joe this a couple of times. I've asked him about just like, how do you, what made you want to play this guy or over this guy? And he's never really going to share that, but what he has said, and it kind of stuck with me, is anytime I play anybody, and if anybody's on the floor, it's because I trust them. And so maybe that means that the guys that we're not seeing are guys that he doesn't trust, but I think it shows now that a guy that maybe he didn't trust a few weeks ago or a year ago in Drew is somebody that he now trusts. So just saw Drew Peterson tonight because he was working at a community event alongside three other Celtics players, Baylor Scheierman, Jordan Walsh, and Neemias Queta. So it was four of them. It was pretty cool. It was a nice vibe. The kids didn't know that they were going to be there, so they were doing a tour of the Auerbach Center. And then the surprise was that there were four Celtics players there, and they were all going crazy. So it was very cool. And so, yeah, really, it was just a fun atmosphere. And then afterwards, we got to chat with Drew. He said this has just been a really awesome week for him. A lot of people reaching out, great energy. And honestly, ultimately, I think that stuck out to me is just he's not getting ahead of himself. He's just recognizing this is an opportunity for what it is. And then he just wants to contribute to the team. And the interesting thing is that Joe Mazzulla does not tell these guys when they're going to play. He doesn't give them a heads up. There is literally no warning, like tonight you might get a run or in an hour you might get some run. It's literally like they turn their heads and suddenly Drew Peterson, who's never played this season, is now playing the entire second quarter. And Bobby Manning asked him about it, and he said the reason for that is that guys will not change their preparation regardless of what the mindset is, regardless of like what the, if they're told, you're probably not play today, human nature is going to be to change your preparation and to change the way that you're doing things. And so he doesn't want them to know. He wants them to act like every single day is going to be a day that you might check in. And so it's kind of a wild mindset, but I think the guys have embraced it, and you're seeing it night in and night out. I mean, Baylor Scheierman played in the rotation yesterday. So literally every single person played yesterday. Jaden Springer and JD Davison were the only two that only played kind of in garbage time, really the last few minutes. But yeah, it's an interesting mindset. And I know this is a championship team. They're 17-4. The real stories are Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Payton Pritchard, who's emerged as really a kind of a phenomenon this year. Derek White, Drew Holiday, Al Horford, like Porzingis, like these are the main stories. But I find this stuff a little interesting because I think it's unique. I don't think that most teams are like this. And I think there's a really strong culture that you don't get to see all the time because it's a pretty available cast. So usually there's not an opportunity for a guy like Drew Peterson to play. But these last few days have been pretty cool in that sense. So that was my little Maine Celtics update. It was fun to talk to them tonight. I think CLNS will have those full videos up from Jordan Walsh and Drew Peterson, who we chatted with. And so if any questions on the Maine Celtics stuff, feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll start going through some other questions. I also just wanted to touch on Kristaps Porzingis' return. I think the last time I did the show, we were still speculating. I had such a strong gut feeling that Porzingis was going to come back any day. Like it was like just from watching his face and his body language, he just seemed like he was on the cusp of a return. And then I think I jokingly said on one of our post-game Garden Report shows, like he's coming back tomorrow. We had a little header that said that, and then he literally came back the next day. So I did not have a source. I didn't know that was going to happen, but he came back, and my gut feeling was fulfilled. So I'm going to continue to go with my gut feeling on this team. And so I think Porzingis has looked really good in his 2 games in his return. First game, he was probably happy with his performance. In the second game, I honestly didn't think he was bad against Cleveland, but he was pretty hard on himself in post-game. He talked about just how he felt like he was a step behind, a step slow. There's going to be a curve of him just getting acclimated and, the team getting acclimated to him being there. I feel like they could have relied on him a little bit more in crunch time than they did. And they're going to probably remember sooner rather than later that he was a real reason, a major part of the reason why their offense was so effective last season. And so, especially in the late game situations, I thought that was like what really helped put them over the top. So looking forward to seeing him play tomorrow when the Celtics play the Pistons. Tomorrow is the first night of a back-to-back. This has been a crazy week from a coverage standpoint because the Celtics were Sunday, Monday playing, and then tomorrow they're playing Detroit, and then they play again on Wednesday, Thursday. What's the schedule actually? Now I'm getting confused. Maybe tomorrow's not the first night of a back-to-back. All I know is that my whole week I have no time to do anything other than watch the Celtics. Okay, no. So tomorrow's Detroit, and then Friday, Saturday is the back-to-back. Milwaukee's on Friday, and then Memphis is on Saturday. So that's going to be the first game that Marcus Smart is back actually playing, presuming that he's going to be healthy and available. So that's a fun week. And then Sunday, I'm going to be up in Maine covering the Maine Celtics. I don't know who will be up there. Maybe some of the guys are going to be, just with Boston. But it's an off day, so I'm assuming that some of the guys that we're seeing are going to go up to Maine to play a little bit more there. So lots of games coming up. After every game, we do a Garden Report show. So if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you can subscribe to CLNS Media to catch that. If you're watching this on CLNS, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, You Got Boston. You can literally just search in your YouTube search button, You Got Boston podcast. It'll come up. That way you won't miss any one of these live streams, any one of these shows. And as always, I really appreciate all the support. Appreciate you guys tuning in, reading my stuff, asking questions, whatever it is. It's made this job just so fun to be able to be a part of this Celtics community. And I really wouldn't trade it for anything. Also want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less and at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 200 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. So you can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. And again, you can now win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. So join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Okay, so I agree with a lot of these comments. There are not other Drew Petersons playing 25-minute back-to-backs. JD Davison is a guy that I wrote a story about a week ago. Or 2 weeks ago now. 3rd year with the organization. He's literally the franchise leader in every category in Maine. And they're sticking with him. Whether he's going to make it in the NBA or whether he's going to make it in Boston, they are sticking with him. And Baylor Scheinman is another good example. Yeah. whoever SPF is, you're really following the Maine Celtics storylines very closely because they're utilizing Baylor exactly how they're going to utilize him in Boston. And he's never come off the bench before. So right now he's literally just practicing the motion of coming off the bench. And that involves just a different routine, a different preparation. So even though he's still playing like 36 minutes, in Boston, in Maine games, he's coming off the bench to just kind of help make that transition easier. And they're running all the same stuff. So even though, it's Drew Peterson had never played in a Celtics game, he knew everything that they were running. He knew what kind of actions they were doing, the defensive schemes, because everything in the G League is the same. So that's why I find that stuff really interesting. I do think, the relationship is pretty unique compared to other franchises. And I do think that depth has been really an interesting storyline so far this season, because I think on paper, this has been the story of the Celtics. On paper, you look at the guys and you're like, is this a deep team? I don't know. Like last year, people were concerned about the bench. And then I think Payton, Pritchard, Sam Hauser, and Luke Cornett give you everything you could have asked for during the regular season. And so that's what's been so fascinating with this team. I think it's a work ethic thing. I think it's a cultural thing. And then I think it's just picking guys that are actually good fits, that are smart players. I'll just say, I have one of the things that I've learned as far as evaluating talent and evaluating free agency moves and roster moves and things like that is not just picking scores. There's no shortage of really good NBA scores. But there is a shortage of really smart players that are just have quick instincts, are good defenders, good playmakers. And I think the Celtics have a number of those. And that's what's made this whole thing kind of work, besides the fact that they have obviously elite all-star talent. I think that all their pieces are just really smart and kind of good locker room guys. And I remember last year before the trade deadline, Brad Stevens was talking about the fact that, you want to just go and maybe get an additional big, but you don't want to, or a additional player, but you don't want to mess up with the locker room chemistry. I think that they're going to be in a similar situation this year where they're not going to want to bring in anybody to the organization before the trade deadline, if that happens, that could mess anything up that they've established here. Because I think what they've established here so far has been a really successful winning culture that has been very drama-free. So I'll leave. That's it. I literally just did 17 minutes on the Maine Celtics, so apologies. Hopefully, if you're tuning into this, that's what you were hoping for. If not, you probably left, so that works too. But I will start to look through some of these comments. And yes, please do like and subscribe. So liking the YouTube video helps, because then I don't want to make a clickbaity title to make people click. I see those all the time on YouTube that are just fake stuff that people put for people to click on. So if you just like it, it helps with the algorithm. It helps get this in front of people who may want to watch. And yeah, so thank you so much, Rui, for pushing people to like the videos. I will have time for some WNBA questions, so maybe we'll do the last few minutes on that, just for people who don't want to listen to, who are here for the Celtics stuff can stay on, and then those who want to do some WNBA stuff, we can talk about that, including Connecticut Sun, which I know for a lot of Boston fans, the Connecticut Sun organization are kind of the sister organization, or the most likely WNBA organization that you would support, unless you have another one that you support, which also works. But I'm just going to start going through here, and if I missed yours, you can put it in the chat again. Question here from Jack. What do you think about Springer in his future? He hasn't gotten much run, but he's also not going back and forth for Maine. So I really like Jaden Springer. Over the summer, I was really impressed by him in Summer League. I thought that he was the biggest standout from the group. He looked advanced. He looked like he had grown a lot offensively, that he was everything that he was advertised to be defensively. And I've only heard good things about him and his work ethic and just his culture and everything. So I really like him. I had high expectations and hopes for him this season. I did a profile on him before the year began, and I really thought that this was going to be an opportunity for him, especially with Porzingis being out, and then there were some early season injuries to Sam Hauser and Jaylen Brown. I thought that he was going to get in there and get an opportunity, and he hasn't. And so I'm never going to get Joe Mazzulla on the record saying anything critical of any of the players. It's actually something that I really appreciate and actually admire about him, that he doesn't use the media as an opportunity to just kind of yell and complain about his team, which a lot of other coaches do. And it makes your life really easy as a reporter, because your story can literally be like Mike Malone called his team lazy or called his team out of shape, which happened. And that's your story. And Joe will never do that. So I don't know how he actually feels about Jaden Springer. He references him all the time as a guy who's in that group of staying ready, getting ready for your opportunity. Obviously, offensively, he's not a shooter. He's never been advertised as a shooter. Although his numbers in the G League when he was in the G League in Philadelphia were fine, and on the I think it's the Delaware Bluecoats. So it was a surprise to me, honestly. It was a surprise to me that Jordan Walsh was ahead of him in the rotation, being that he's 3 years younger and more inexperienced and had a very rough summer league showing. It was also a surprise to me that Drew Peterson, who really hasn't been in Boston this week, has kind of jumped him in the rotation. But like I said earlier, from what I know about Joe Mazzulla, it's when he trusts the guy, he plays them. And the inverse of that is probably true too. Like there's been opportunities for Jaden Springer to get in this year, and he hasn't played. And it's probably a reflection of the fact that Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics coaching staff don't trust him right now, or at least they trust other guys more because they've played those guys over him. And so I still think there's a lot of things about his game, his defensive instincts, who can't be taught, can't be replicated, that I think make him an NBA player. But it might not end up being in Boston, and it might not end up being at all. You never know. There's a lot of guys that are on the cusp that don't make it over the hump, and those are the ones you don't remember because they end up going overseas. There was a report by Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype that said that the Celtics organization was shopping him around and kind of gauging his price. And I think the league value would have been to attach a pick to his contract. He has like about a $4 million deal, so it's not a minimum deal. It's more than that. It's the final year of his rookie deal. And so it sounds like there was an interest in taking on his contract, and you can't really blame teams because right now he's been on 2 organizations where he really hasn't played. And so he's not very proven. I mean, the only thing that they know is Celtics have chosen not to play him. So, you want to trade a guy when his value is a little bit higher. And I think actually Jaden's value was a little bit higher when he got traded to Boston because he had just played in a couple of games and done a really good job defensively against guys like Steph Curry and Luka. And so Jaden's one of the guys that goes to a lot of community events. I've had the chance to talk to him a couple of times this year about his mindset. And I'm sure it's hard, but he's always said, like, I'm just going to put in the work. I'm going to do everything I need to do all the little things, and everything's going to work out for me. So he seems to have a good mentality. Some of that is just, saying the smart things to, from a PR standpoint, but I do think that he has a future, but right now, if you're asking me, like, who's the most likely guy to get traded from Boston, before the trade deadline, I think he's probably number 1. So we'll see. We'll see exactly how it looks and how it pans out for him. Maybe next week, it's the big Jaden Springer week. Everybody's had their chance so far this year. Nimi had his stretch. Luke had his stretch. Jordan Walsh had his. Drew Peterson had his. So maybe Springer is due for a couple of games where he gets a bigger opportunity, and Joe is just kind of having to wait his turn. But it's also possible it's just not going to be here in Boston. So we'll see. Similar question about rotation, who's kind of more likely to take the next leap, JD or Drew? What's interesting is that JD Davison is a better player in Maine. It's not a question. JD Davison is one of the best players in the G League. He's the best player on the Maine Celtics. He was the best player on the Maine Celtics when Nimi Isketa was on the Maine Celtics. And so that doesn't mean that he's the most translatable player to the NBA. And one of the unfair things about seeing Maine Celtics players and then seeing the NBA is that it's not the best U League players that end up working in the NBA. A lot of times it's guys that can do a very specific thing that an NBA team needs, who maybe can't be primary scoring options even in the G League. And I think Jordan Walsh is a good example of that JD Davison is miles ahead of Jordan in his development, but he's also a small, undersized point guard who's not a great shooter, and he's not going to be a defensive weapon. In fact, he's probably a defensive liability. So right now, it's hard to not say Drew Peterson is the one that's more likely to take the next step because we're literally seeing him take the next step right in front of us. He just played 50 minutes in 2 nights. And I also think that his just raw skill set, like he's 6'9". You can't teach height. You can't teach, the size that he has that can help him defensively. So I'm really high on JD long term, but right now it seems like Drew Peterson's the guy that's going to really capture this opportunity. I was hoping last night JD Davison was going to get some run. Last night would have been the opportunity to do so. But obviously that did not happen. So we'll see if anything kind of changes there, but yeah, it's right now definitely looking like Drew Peterson's ahead of him. And Rui here has an update for us. Those of you who know, tonight is the night that's going to be determining the Celtics Cup fate. So if the Celtics win tonight, if Orlando wins tonight, beats New York, then that's the first of 2 things that need to happen here for the Celtics to make the Cup. The other is a Milwaukee-Detroit game finishing in a 6-point swing. So it can't be a blowout in either direction or even somewhat of a win. So we're going to keep our eye on those. We'll have some updates for you. I'm so bad at understanding not understanding, but just remembering the point differential thing. So, but we do know that by the end of tonight, we'll know if the Celtics are advancing or not. Neil, it's a good question. I have not asked about players about their exact like lifting and workout regimens. I wonder if they would share. Sometimes certain like types of questions are really interesting, but they just like, wouldn't answer. But I haven't been. I'm not like much of a gym person, but the last few weeks, I'm more of like a running person. So I've run a couple marathons, and the last few weeks I decided I wanted to start lifting weights, and that's actually how I popped this thing. It was from lifting something, which is embarrassing. But it made me start thinking, I wonder which of these machines like the guys use and like who uses, if there's certain machines that like certain people use more. Maybe that's a really dumb question to people who know a lot about lifting, but I started thinking like, I'm sure there's something here, like some story here about maybe someone changing their regimen, changing their lifting routine. So you certainly see the impacts and you hear about guys putting on weight, but it's not something that I've explored personally. So I'll do a story on this. I'll follow up if I see that it's a well-received question. It might be one of those things that they're kind of trained not to talk too much about. So it's possible we won't hear much about. Ruby, great question about spot number 15. I think everybody knows there's an open roster spot on the Celtics. The decision to not sign Lonnie Walker meant that there was going to be an opportunity for a potential two-way to get converted. And that is, that's something that is, I love the idea of kind of guys moving through the organization. You see it on the coaching staff. Guys started in player development. They're moving up. You see it in Maine, and I've talked enough during this episode about that. I think Drew Peterson right now looks like the number one candidate. This is kind of what we saw with Nemi Takeda last year, where he was a two-way, and then all of a sudden he was playing really significant minutes. And when a guy's playing really significant minutes in Boston, if it's more than a few games, he's likely going to be the guy that is converted. That being said, there is a pretty big tax bill that will accompany any guy getting that 15th roster spot. So I do think that they also might just leave it open. But if Drew continues to play here and it's, April and they're about to go into the playoffs and they think, hey, let's sign this guy. That's what they did with Nemi. So there's precedent for it. But again, I don't want to get too crazy with this Drew Peterson stuff because literally 3 days ago, I would have sounded absurd saying this. Like there was no indication that they were viewing him in that spot, but this was a big week for him. This is kind of the opportunity of a lifetime, and he capitalized. He did a really good job, and it also just reminds you that they re-signed him on a two-way. Like they didn't need to do that. They could have gone back, and there's literally endless people you could sign on that two-way deal, and instead they chose to bring back somebody that they already worked with. So I'm going to say probably Drew right now. And no worries, Tom. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. I should have started with that. I forgot Thanksgiving was not that long ago now. I don't think the Celtics are going to advance the cup. It just felt like a couple too many qualifications needed to happen tonight, that it felt more likely that it would not happen. But in like 2 hours, we'll know. So at this point, it's just an absolute guess. So we'll see. And thank you. I will say I credit a lot of my basketball knowledge to my dad because we literally, before I started doing this full time, I would have like an hour phone call with him about basketball every single day after every single game, where we would just debrief the game and we would talk about things. So I feel like I had all these reps from years of these phone calls that now I get to do here. So I appreciate you all tuning in. Trap bar deadlift. Okay, I still need to learn more lifting terminology. But I'll be back with a story. I like this idea. So we'll see. Okay, team chemistry. I think the team chemistry has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm actually doing a story on the fatherhood element of it because everybody's kids are literally constantly around and it's been really fun to watch. I don't have any kids. I'm not like a huge kid enthusiast, but even I appreciate just how like nice this culture has been. So check out, that story will be out hopefully tomorrow if I can sit down and really write tonight. We'll see. But the culture has just been like, you can just tell that these guys have years of continuity at this point. So many teams, when you look around the league, like the majority of guys are getting to know each other, and that takes time both on the court and off the court. This team is not like that. This team has guys like Drew Peterson and JD Davison who are new and young, and even they're not completely new. The core, Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, they've played together for years now. It's been 7 years of them playing together effectively. Even Derek White, Sam Hauser, Luke Cornett, this is multiple seasons in a row. And you can tell that the new guys, like the guys that I was with tonight at this community event, Like, you can tell they all get along, and you can tell that they embrace the fact that you come to this organization and that there's just this kind of welcoming culture right from the top. And so I haven't caught any element of there being any shade or like anybody kind of like saying something in a post-game presser to get at somebody else. From what I hear, it used to be a lot like that, but I never covered this team when the culture was bad at all. So it seems like they're really loose. One thing I'll say very specifically is that Jaylen Brown genuinely seems like a different person. I think that Jaylen Brown has like the weight of the world off his shoulders with last year's finals MVP and the championship. And I think that he feels like he's proven the haters, the doubters, whatever it is. He's been so like friendly at the podium. He's always laughing, smiling. So from what he was not really like this last year. He definitely wasn't like this earlier in his career. So him and several other guys, you can really see the difference of just kind of winning the championship after a glow. But for everybody else, it's just this level of continuity that is quite evident. And while I actually made a bet with another reporter early on that Drew Peterson was going to become a rotation level NBA player. And then I actually retracted it earlier this year when it looked like he wasn't going to. So I can't claim too much credit. But early on, I was really high on him when I saw him in Maine. That being said, I'm not going to say all-star potential here. I don't see it right now. I don't want to diminish his ceiling, but as you guys probably know, Payton Pritchard, I've been singing his praises since last year, and that's not looking as crazy. Although he's on all-star, but it's not looking as crazy yet. But I want to be selective when I make those predictions so that they can continue to have a good track record here. Question here from Stone Cold Beard: Who should get the final shot down by 1? I think the correct answer here is whoever is open. And I know that sounds like a dumb cop-out, but in reality, I think that this team has so many guys that can hit open shots in the offense. And just like they don't run plays for Tatum, for Brown for the most part, they're running an offense and they're making the right read. I think that the last play should have the same mindset where you're not running a play for Tatum and then he's holding the ball and dribbling down the clock and then taking a shot at the buzzer. That's not a great shot because he was defended well, but you're actually running the same type of offense that you would normally run. Because I feel comfortable with Derek White, Jaylen Brown, who's been really clutch, Derek White, who's been historically clutch when you look at his advanced numbers in the fourth quarter. Jayson Tatum, obviously, he actually has been really clutch this year. So I know he has a bad rep for game winners, but he's hit a game winner this year. He's hit some big shots down the stretch. And then even guys like Payton Pritchard, like I think anybody here would feel comfortable with Payton Pritchard taking a final shot right now. Like literally the reason the Cavs were fouling down 3, Kenny Atkinson said this post game was because he didn't want to see Pritchard take a pull-up 3. Like he didn't want any part of it. And you can't blame him if you've been watching this team and Pritchard as of late. So, well, yeah, I think just really anybody, but I don't really care who it is, but I do care that it's a good quality shot. And then you're not just saying, Tatum, you're the guy, or Jaylen, you've had the hot hand, like you're going to take the shot. Because they just have enough weapons where they're going to get a good look if they don't force the issue to one guy. Easier said than done, but that would be my mindset. So, this is interesting. This is a suggestion about the NBA Cup. I think winning the Cup ought to give a team an extra roster spot or cap money. That would be valuable. Yeah, I think the incentive with the Cup is honestly not bad. Like, if we're being real, like the Cup, it's $500,000 a player. So to me, it's like if you can't be motivated by that, like the wealth is just crazy because you have teammates like JD Davison that's nearly his annual salary. And so I think they want to win. It's just hard when like the big things, the championship and the playoffs, and you're playing in games literally all the time. From covering this team, it's made me realize like they're playing every night, it feels like, or they're at practice or they're at something. So it's just, you can't always be on, but it would be cool to have a team related incentive that is like, makes maybe the whole culture around it shift a little bit beyond just like extra cash. I'm going to take a few more of these questions, but first I just wanted to thank our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is literally my favorite app for purchases. I use Game Time for all my ticket purchases, for a lot of gifts. I'm a terrible gift giver. For people who know me in real life, you can probably attest to that. So I just buy tickets for my friends and family to Celtics games or other events that I know that they want to go to, and then I don't have to worry about it. So you can download the Game Time app. You can look through all of its features. There's different ways you can see the exact seat, the seat view. You can see all in pricing. So you can see that there's no surprise fees. Like the price that it says is the price that it is after fees, after taxes, after everything. And then you can see that panoramic view from your seat, so you can kind of see, do you want to sit behind the basket? I hate sitting behind the basket. I like sitting like TV view. So if I was going to buy a ticket, I'd rather sit in the balcony and have a panoramic view that I can see like courtside rather than sitting at a weird angle closer to the court. But your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to the Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can create an account. Use code CLNS. What time is it? Game time. Okay, so gonna do a couple more questions here, and then we will call it. And I appreciate all the good questions here. It's been fun to answer. So I'm gonna do maybe one last NBA question, and then I'll do a couple of WNBA questions. So yeah, chemistry is good. Agreed. I would say this. I've seen this comment a couple times. The Brown has mentioned a few times, this is my team, my guys. He talked like that all of last year too. I can't say how he spoke for certain in previous years because I wasn't following every single one of his words the way that I do now. I don't think that he views it as like overthrowing Tatum for leadership. I think that's the way that he has established himself as the leader, and I don't think it's like in comparison or to replace somebody else. So, but he has clearly from last year, he made it very clear that he was talking as a leader of this team, and it was not subtle. It was very clear from the beginning. Ooh, and I would love to see Pritchard in the three-point contest and the skills challenge and all-star, because skills in particular used to be such a fun challenge. Like I remember being a little kid and watching like Deron Williams and Chris Paul and Rondo and all these like star point guards competing in the skills challenge, and it was like the place to be. And now it's like random players that are not like that skilled, like are not the ball handlers or not the passers. Like I want all the best point guards in it. So Pritchard would be the perfect player in that. And if they're going to try to make that legit again, because I feel like that's been like one of the all-star things that's totally fallen off in recent years. But yeah, okay, I'm going to do a couple WNBA questions because I don't see any more pressing NBA questions or Celtics questions. So feel free to tune in, to stay locked in if you want to hear some of those. If there are more NBA questions that I missed, I'm happy to answer those. We'll probably do a few more minutes here. I will just pin this comment because something that I've noticed over the last 2 years is that the Celtics really don't miss a beat when they're down a key player. Like they really don't. They can overcome the absence of Porzingis, as we've seen, and literally win a championship mostly without him. They can overcome the absences of Jayson Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford all the time, Drew Holiday. They really are different when Derek White's not there. And it's not a huge sample size, but they're 6-4 without him in the last 2 years. And they with some really bad losses against Charlotte, against other teams that they had no business losing to. So 6-4 is not terrible, but compared to what their win percentage has been, it's pretty bad. I think Derek White is the one guy that when he sits, like they don't know exactly how to compensate for his skill set being missing. And especially down the stretch, he's so important. But defensively, the things that he does, we'll need a bigger sample size before we can go crazy with that. But I really do think that he's the one guy that it seems like they have a hard time missing. So definitely would hate to see any sort of Derek White injury, obviously always, but from a team standpoint, like I think he's the one guy that they really would struggle without even in the short term. And maybe it would take a little bit of adjusting and then they'd figure out like what the things are that they're struggling with. But yeah, so WNBA questions. And yes, I do think he should be an all-star this season. I think the Celtics should have 3 provided that they finish with a top 2 record. And I think that he makes a really strong case, especially with what he's done on the defensive end. So, okay. WNBA questions. I'm going to try to look through here. If you asked one earlier and I missed it, feel free to put it back in the chat so I can make sure I don't miss it. Rui, this is a great question. So for those of you that are, have been following the WNBA, the Connecticut Sun play one game at TD Garden every year. And this is starting from last season. Last season, they played their first ever game at TD Garden. It was a historic game. It was the first time ever that the WNBA played there. I covered the game. It was awesome. I know some of you attended. And it was a whole lot of fun and just a great environment. It was a great game, too. They were trailing, and then they ended up going on a big run towards the end of the game, beating the Los Angeles Sparks, who were, I think, the worst team in the league at the time, so not the most marquee win. But this season, they are playing the Fever. Fever, which are headlined by Caitlin Clark, also include Aaliyah Boston, maybe Kelsey Mitchell if she resigns. She's one of their kind of core players. Another fun storyline is that Stephanie White, who was the head coach of the Connecticut Sun for the last 2 years, is coaching the Fever now, so she'll be back. But I had the exact same reaction to this, Rui, that this should not have been the Garden game. On one hand, I get it. A lot of Boston fans want to see Caitlin Clark play, and this is an opportunity to do so. And this is going to be an insane environment. I'm sure that it'll feel much more like a Fever crowd, though. And so maybe have multiple Sun games in TD Garden, and then you could have your Caitlin Clark game for people that just want to see her play in Boston that haven't really had much of an opportunity to do so. But Mohegan was going to fill up with Caitlin Clark fans regardless, and this game was going to fill up with whatever team. You could literally have any team there, and it was going to sell out because it sold out against the Sparks last year without Cameron Brink, who was injured. So I also thought that you could play the Aces, you could play a team that's not necessarily going to sell out your arena the way that Caitlin Clark will, and then just capitalize on the fact that TD Garden is going to sell out because it's the one game a year that Boston fans can catch a WNBA game in their home city. I also just feel like the Sun had a really incredible experience last year because they were able to play in front of a home crowd, and pretty much everywhere the Fever go, it becomes a home game for them. They're kind of like the Celtics of the WNBA in that sense, where they really don't play road games right now. So yeah. I would hate for them to not have their home game in front of TD Garden because it becomes more of a Fever home game, even though I do get why from a league standpoint, you want to have, you want to leverage the fact that she is going to fill that arena out for sure. So the answer to me is like have multiple TD Garden games. Like, why not? It's the middle of the summer. They have time. So we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun though. And I know a lot of people are going to want to watch that maybe wouldn't have watched otherwise. So we'll see. And Paige Beckers is definitely still the projected number 1 pick. I don't think she's going to have quite the Caitlin Clark effect, but I think that she will have a pretty substantial effect on her city, regardless of where she goes. Right now, Dallas has the number 1 pick. They won the lottery. They won the number 1 pick a couple years ago and actually drafted a player that is already out of the league. So I think they're going to pick her. Even there's been some reports that she doesn't want to go there. I haven't seen anything from her camp that has said that, so I assume that she's going to suck it up and go to where she was drafted. But she's been really fun to watch. I'm sure some people in the New England area have caught maybe a UConn game. I want to go to one soon. But she's just an all-around player. Like, she is a great playmaker. She's a good defender. She's a good rebounder, good scorer. But she's not somebody that's going to go for 40 because she really doesn't take bad shots. She probably should take more bad shots. But she's a lot of fun to watch, and I think she's going to help revive the Dallas Wings franchise. I actually covered a Dallas Wings game when I was in Dallas for the NBA Finals last year because I was there for the Celtics Dallas Finals, and then I attended a WNBA game as well. The Sun were playing the Wings, so it all worked out perfectly. And it was one of the worst WNBA environments that I've been to, just as far as the fans. It was very, not a full arena. It was pretty quiet. Like, just felt like the franchise needs to be revived a little bit. So I'm excited that Paige is going to hopefully help with that. So we'll see if she ends up forcing her way to LA, which has been speculated but not substantiated. But right now she is projected to be the number 1 pick. There's a couple other names that are in the mix there, but I would be really surprised if it wasn't her. Saw a question here about Haley Van Lith. She's a lot of fun to watch. I really fell in love with her game when she was playing 3x3 basketball this summer in Paris. And she transferred from LSU to TCU, and I think a lot of people were kind of puzzled by that move, but she's been really off to a hot start there. The challenge for her is that she's 5'7", and she's maybe a generous 5'7", and so I don't know how her game's going to translate to the WNBA because already she's hunted on quite a bit defensively. And then you see players like Caitlin Clark, who's 6 feet tall, who has been somewhat of a defensive liability this year. Now imagine being 5'7". So it's really a huge challenge. That's going to be her challenge, but I think she'll be a second-round pick. I could see her having like a Kate Martin type storyline where she does actually catch onto a team and impact a team, but it's interesting because she's such a phenomenal college player. A lot of the same thing as NBA. If you don't have the physical tools, you might not translate. So I hope she can make it. I think she's a fun player and she has a pretty big following, so she'd help elevate a franchise as well. But we'll see. And then I know there was one question about the Connecticut Sun coaching hire. I haven't heard anything specific about who they might be looking at for a head coach. I will say today they announced that their assistant general manager, Morgan Tuck, former UConn player, is now the general manager, and she'll be doing a press conference this week. So certainly something that we will ask her about in that press conference, and hopefully I'll have more information after that. But Connecticut could be entering a rebuilding year. They also could bring back the whole cast. I've heard that Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner like would stay. So as much as it's not the most like appealing situation, they don't have their own practice facility, they're not in a major market. I think it's worked for them, and they have a loyal fan base, and so yeah, it's a fun situation, and if they can bring back Alyssa Thomas and Dewana Bonner, they're instantly going to be competitive and they're going to be contenders because that's just been what this team has been over the last few years. You lose those two, and I think they're going to be a package deal. They're engaged. If you lose those two, I think you're probably entering a rebuilding phase, and so we'll see. Brianna Jones also a free agent. Dejanay Carrington restricted free agent. So there's a lot of outstanding questions for this team, probably more so than any other team. I don't even know if they're going to be contender next year or they're going to be bottom of the league standing. So it's really unclear. So with that being said, I'll be up there in Uncasville and Mohegan Sun Arena quite a bit, and certainly we'll be covering the game in July at TD Garden, which has been was one of my favorite experiences from the Garden last year, and there was no shortage of great TD Garden experiences. And then just a shout out to Nafisa Collier, who is so fun to watch. She was the defensive player of the year last year, but also just what she does offensively is brilliant. If you're bored with the NBA from the standpoint of like you're watching a lot of, the way that you've been watching a lot of like how the game has been really homogenous, like a lot of people criticize all the 3-pointers and all that, and I don't personally agree. I love watching the NBA right now. But if you want to see a more diversified offense and more like old school NBA basketball, I think the WNBA has elements of that right now. And I will just give a shout out. There's a new 3-on-3 basketball league called Unrivaled that is going to be taking place in Miami. This offseason starts next month, co-founded by Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart. And it's a 3-on-3 basketball league for 34 of the best WNBA players in the world. And so if you're someone that's like, oh, I'm kind of interested in the WNBA, but I don't know, you can watch this league starting in January. They partnered with TNT. It's been massive. I've been really on top of the story. I've been really interested in this league and its inception. It's just something completely new. It's a completely new professional sports league, and it's not, instead of the WNBA, it's complementary to it in the off season so that players don't have to go overseas. They're making way more money than they're making the WNBA. They're playing full court 3-on-3, which will be interesting to see how that plays out from a basketball standpoint. But you can check that out starting next month. All of my WNBA coverage is on sbnation.com/WNBA, so you can check that out. I'm going to wrap up here, but please subscribe, like, comment, share. Feel free to message me if there's other questions you wanted to answer and that I didn't get to. Sorry if I missed your question. I tried to get through as many as possible. I always say I'm going to do 30 minutes, and it's never going to end up being that. So with that, tomorrow, Celtics Pistons, I will have post-game coverage on the Garden Report. You can find that on CLNS Media. And if there's anything that I can assist with in the meantime, feel free to reach out. But keep your eyes peeled for a story about the Celtics organization culture around fatherhood and parenthood and all of that. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate all the support, all the engagement, and have a great rest of your evening following the other NBA games that determine whether or not the Celtics advance to the Cup.